Moving along the same theme, Alif, we've been talking for a long time when we saw the new employer compliance inspections roll out, and we've seen this in the corporate world for employers of temporary foreign workers. We saw it being released in the startup scene. Why don't you give us a sense of how that process works and how, again, along the theme of enhanced compliance, how it's evolving in terms of the form that it's taking?
Sure. Thanks, Naman. So as mentioned, the employer compliance inspections, they kind of came to rise within the last 2 years or so. And typically it was geared towards the issuance of the work permit. So the basis for the inspection was, is this worker actually working for the company? Where are they working? What's the location? Are they being paid in consideration of the offer of employment that was submitted before IRCC? So there was a number of checks and balances that were put in place. And that was the previous regime. So now we are actually seeing a bit of a change and a shift where things are becoming a little bit more tightened. So there is a bit of a stricter employer compliance regime right now. And so previously they were asking for very high level things like, what type of work were you doing? What's in your job duties? What's your description? What role are you performing in Canada? And they would ask you questions about your physical work location as well. So those are very common. It was more so about the employer-employee relationship. But under the SUV program, there was a bit of a nuance because the employer is also the employee. So they both were the same person. And so a lot of those questions we were able to handle fairly easily, as long as you could show activities, you're actively involved, and you had documentary evidence for everything to back up those claims and that information. And so that was the previous employer compliance inspection. But what we're seeing right now is an enhanced version of that. So this is actually a list of everything that was requested previously. So incorporation documents, your business license, CRA, tax documents, financial statements, invoices for clients, bills paid, lease agreements, and other engagements with companies or contracts with other customers even. The last point is all relevant information to show the officer that you're actively involved. That was kind of a catch-all. And so all of this kind of still remains true, but the enhanced aspect is the new on-site inspections that we're seeing. So typically you get a notice saying that there will be a inspection that will be held on site for the address that you've listed in the offer of employment. If it's a virtual office, they may just end up making a meeting with you at a desirable location, maybe the incubator's office, maybe in IRCC's office. It's not really clear where they would do so in a virtual setting, but they typically give you notice that this inspection is happening. However, the officer could actually just show up and complete a site visit with the employer and employee. So they may come to your office, they may say, hey, we're from IRCC, there's an inspection taking place, can we have a moment of your time? And when I say a moment of your time, in the actual timeline, it could be up to 2-3 hours that this inspection may happen. And the interview process is very rigorous. The officer is going to ask you a number of questions about your activities. In this list over here, they also ask about your business idea, what kind of clients you have, what type of business you're operating, what your business plan is. And they could also ask about how you're funding the operation, what kind of expenses you have, what transactions have you been making. And then that's all in addition to the previous compliance questions that they had. And so the purpose of these inspections is to ensure that there is integrity in what you're doing in the business. And it's to ensure that these startup companies are legitimate. So it's another layer of validity that's being put into place by IRCC. And there could be a number of things that the officer asks about. They can even ask about more compliance-related questions, such as who created your business plan. This is a very hot topic right now because it looks like the officers are becoming more knowledgeable about the different methods that these startup companies may have for creating a business plan. One key thing to know is that if the officer believes that the business plan was maybe created by an entity that maybe shouldn't have created the business plan and the founders had nothing to do with it, then it could be it could negatively impact your PR application. These officers, they make very detailed notes, and they put all of these notes on the file for your PR application. And it could also have implications on your work permit as well. So if you're here in Canada on the work permit, you're working, and the officer believes that maybe something isn't quite right, they could put a note on your work permit so that when you make another application for an extension, perhaps, they could potentially see that note in the system, and it may raise some further questions or concerns that the officer may put to you in that application. Obviously, for non-compliance, if the officer believes that you're non-compliant, there's also fines and penalties that may be issued depending on how severe the non-compliance is. And obviously all of that will be put towards your PR file as well. So that you could have, 3 immediate issues that are very live. And so that's also something to be aware of when these compliance inspections start rolling out more frequently, which we do anticipate will happen probably more frequently during this year because of this this theory of like enhanced integrity that we're seeing now. This is most likely going to be the trend for the next year, maybe even after that.
Alif, a couple comments. Thank you for the overview. One of the issues to keep in mind is that the officer, when they do have the review, they have wide-ranging authority to request whatever information they feel is relevant to the review. When these regulations came out in the traditional employer context, that's what many lawyers were concerned about. It's really important, if you do get one of these inspection letters, that you do seek counsel and you get an advisor to understand exactly what are they asking for, what is the impact of the information you're providing, and is the information clear and addressing the concerns of the officer. And what we noticed is traditionally they were looking at more objective activity related information, but we see here that they're looking again about the intention related issues, which when we go back to artificial transactions, it goes to the heart of the application. So if they do find on an inspection that there are any concerns, yes, as Alif mentioned, you could be fined, you could get a warning, you could be in fact subject to further audits and review. But if that occurs, keep in mind that that's a really significant red flag for your PR, and the officer would want to know why there were concerns or if there was a violation. It's very difficult to overcome that. So I think absolutely the 2 points Pushkar and both Alif have mentioned is whether it's landing, whether it's, the integrity of your filing, or even on an inspection. Integrity is going to be the theme, we believe, of this year, in checking to ensure that you're meeting the spirit of the program. The regulations, when released, they'll help us understand that even better.
Yeah, and just going off of best practices, like Naman mentioned, seeking legal guidance during these inspections is very important, because the applicant, you may not appreciate completely the questions that the officer is asking, because there may be deeper meaning towards what they're asking you, and it could have significant impacts later on. So if they ask you things like your activities, and you say, "Oh, I only just got to Canada, so I'm just starting to get the ball rolling on my SUV." Obviously, the officer would maybe just make a note saying, they haven't been actively involved, right? And something as simple as that could be put into your PR application, which could have significant effects, negative effects. So it's important that you have legal guidance throughout the process, so that you have someone there with you who can guide you and kind of prepare you as best as possible for these inspections. And it's something that I don't think the entrepreneur should be handling by themselves, just because of the impacts that it may have later down the line on your other applications. And so some best practices, just going quickly through these, maintain detailed business records. So we have an activity tracker that we give to our clients. It has a list of all of the typical questions that the officer may have at the very beginning of your processing of your application. So things like, have you opened a bank account? Have you incorporated your company? Do you have any contracts with clients? Have you activated payroll? Things of that nature. Those are very common questions that you may receive within your first year of processing. So I think maintaining those records to make sure that you're prepared for a potential inspection, because again, they may give you notice, they may just come by your office. So it's important that you are prepared at all times. And so, maintaining those business records is very important. Having an activity tracker, whether it's our tracker or your own tracker, as long as you're updating it on a weekly basis. Some clients even do it on a daily basis, depending on how active they are and how much they can show. But as long as you're revisiting it frequently and making sure that it's up to date, that will help you prepare for these compliance inspections. And it'll also help for your PR application as well, because you'll be able to show the officer everything that you've been doing. And you can even hopefully, if you answer the officer's questions preemptively by showing them all of your activities and progress, you could potentially cut down the processing time of your application as well, which is something that we've been successful in for some of our other clients. By showing these activities, we're showing that the business is legitimate and they're actively involved, so they should be approved earlier. And it has worked in the past. It's hard to say right now if it would still work, just based on processing times and the levels plans as well. But I think it's still a good strategy to keep in place, because it will set you up for success, whether you get a compliance inspection or not. I think it is good practice to have overall. The timeline is typically the first 2 years of time spent in Canada when you're operating your business. That's usually the focus of these inspections. So it is important to kind of hit the ground running and try to get as much done as possible within your first 2 years. The information and the activities that you provide after those 2 years will all be helpful for your PR application. But I think the scope for the inspections is typically the first 2 years. So I think that's where your focus should be. And again, seek legal guidance if necessary once you've received notice. I think it's always a good idea to have that legal opinion.